You've heard of the Titanic. You might even know the Lusitania. But there's another ocean liner, sleek, fast and proud, that went down in minutes in cold Canadian waters, taking more than 1,000 lives with her. She was called the Empress of Ireland, and for a century she's been hiding in history's fog. Tonight we're going to clear that fog. This is the story of the Empress of Ireland, sometimes called the Canadian Titanic, a ship that sank so quickly, so quietly, that the world barely had time to read the headlines before war drowned them out. Picture the St. Lawrence River, a giant moving road of water that slices through Quebec and out to the Atlantic. It's not a lazy river, it's a highway. Ships use it to go between Europe and the Canadian heartland. On a map it looks wide and welcoming. In real life it's full of currents, shifting weather and fog that can appear like someone switched the world off with a dimmer. Fog, if you've never stood inside it on the water, is like being wrapped in a grey bedsheet. You know there are edges and shapes around you, but your eyes only get a few yards of truth. On the last night of May 1914, the Empress of Ireland sailed into that fog, and into a rendezvous she could neither see nor escape. The Empress of Ireland wasn't the biggest ship in the world. She didn't have a grand staircase that people wrote poems about. What she had was reliability, shuttling people and mail back and forth between Canada and Britain like a steel commuter train that surfed the Atlantic. Think of her as a transatlantic workhorse. She was built to be fast, comfortable and modern for her time. Her job, carry families, immigrants, business travellers and crew across the ocean efficiently and safely. The company behind her, Canadian Pacific, wanted a dependable flagship, and they got one. For years the Empress crossed the Atlantic without drama. On May 28, 1914, she left Quebec City bound for Liverpool with more than 1,400 people aboard, passengers and crew, including a vibrant group heading to a Salvation Army International Congress in Britain. The St. Lawrence spread ahead like a runway, and her captain, Henry Kendall, knew these waters well. It was late spring, long light in the evenings, cool air, and the kind of river traffic that makes you feel like you're part of something big. Steamers, cargo ships, tugs, everyone flowing toward the ocean. Sailors have a simple prayer: let the weather be boring. That night the weather got interesting. Near a place called Pointe-au-Père, the Empress discharged her river pilot, the local expert who rides along to help navigate tricky stretches. The open water lay ahead. Captain Kendall had the watch. The ship pressed on. But on the river, temperature and wind can pull a magic trick. They can create fog out of nowhere. One moment you're under a starry sky. The next, your ship is wrapped in a grey cocoon. Suddenly sound becomes your best friend and your worst enemy, because every whistle, every horn, every distant churn of a screw comes to you without a return address. Ahead of the Empress was another ship, the Norwegian collier SS Storstad, a coal carrier hauling dark cargo and a heavy hull. Coal ships were tough, thick-boned and slow-turning. They could shoulder their way through bad weather and bad luck, but they couldn't shoulder through time and space if another ship was in the same place at the same time. That night, the river set the stage. Fog lowered the curtain, and two ships, each with their own momentum, slid toward a single point. Here's how collisions happen at sea. Not like a car crash with screeching brakes and sparks, but like a math problem. Angles, speeds, signals, bearings. Each minute matters. In clear conditions, small misunderstandings can be corrected by sight. In fog, all the cues turn into guesses. Sound travels weirdly. What feels like over there can really be right here. And every captain has to interpret what the other one means. The Empress of Ireland saw the Storstad, then lost her in fog, then heard her, and the Storstad's crew for their part believed they were holding to a safe path. Signals were sounded. Each captain tried to make the safe choice. But safe choices made under wrong assumptions can lead to disaster. The vehicles weigh thousands of tons and are moving over water, where stopping on a dime is not an option. Around 2 a.m. on May 29, 1914, the grey world suddenly had a shape, a dark bow emerging from the fog like a cliff. The Storstad was right there, close enough to count the rivets. When ships collide, metal meets metal with a force we don't experience on land. The Storstad's bow slid into the Empress of Ireland's starboard side. Starboard means the right-hand side if you're facing forward, opening her like a zipper beneath the waterline. Water is heavy. A cubic metre weighs a metric ton, about the mass of a small car. When water floods a ship's compartments, it doesn't stroll in, it charges. The Empress was designed with watertight bulkheads, walls meant to keep flooding contained, but the blow tore a wide gap low in her hull and the river didn't trickle, it poured. Within minutes the Empress began to list, leaning to starboard. Passengers were asleep. Some felt the thud. Others woke to the sickening angle of the floor sliding away. Imagine darkness, cold air, and the distant shouts of crew who suddenly have minutes to do a job designed for hours. Here's the detail that chills. From collision to sinking, the Empress of Ireland had about 14 minutes, not an hour, not even half an hour. 14 minutes, the length of a coffee break or a short phone call. The Titanic took around 2 hours and 40 minutes to go under. The Lusitania, hit by a torpedo a year later, sank in roughly 18 minutes. 14 minutes is barely time to wake up, put on a coat, find your family, and climb to a boat deck, assuming the boat deck is still level and reachable. The list to starboard made launching lifeboats on that side almost impossible. The boats on the higher port side, port means left, were suddenly swung up and away like trying to lower a lifeboat from a tilted roof. Gravity fought every effort. Crew discipline mattered, it always does, but no amount of training turns 14 minutes into 40. Water doesn't wait for perfect execution, it just rises. In cabins, the angle turned corridors into ramps. Some doors jammed, people crawled, slipped, shouted, parents grabbed children, strangers grabbed strangers. Above deck, officers tried to get boats away, but each minute erased options. The river rushed in like a panicked crowd trying to exit a stadium through a single doorway. Down below, the Empress's engines and boilers, her iron heart, met cold water. Steam met steel. Systems that power a ship can't argue with the laws of physics. Lights may have flickered. In the night air, the fog swallowed sound and threw it back. And then the Empress of Ireland rolled. There's a horrifying moment in fast sinkings when a ship becomes less like a building and more like a falling tree. As she listed farther, the Empress rolled onto her starboard side. For anyone still inside, floors turned into walls. Furniture became barricades. Windows became traps. The route that made sense one minute became a dead end the next. If you've ever tried to find your way in a dark room and someone suddenly rotates the room 90 degrees, that's the kind of chaos we're talking about. People who made it to the open deck faced another enemy, cold. The St. Lawrence River in late May is not bathwater. It's snowmelt and sea mixed together, cold enough to shock your breath away and steal your strength quickly. The water doesn't have to be freezing to kill. It just has to be cold enough for long enough, and long enough can be minutes. Lifebelts, what we'd call life jackets, were there, but time was not. Some lifeboats did get away. Others were torn in the panic or crushed by the tilt. The Storstad, to her credit, launched boats to help. The Norwegian crew, stunned to find they had rammed a liner, did what rescuers always do in the worst moments. They went toward the danger, they hauled survivors into their boats and tried to find more in the fog. But night water hides people. And the Empress went under quickly, leaving a slick of debris and silence. When dawn finally climbed over the river, the scale of the disaster showed itself. The Empress of Ireland had carried over 1,400 souls. More than 1,000, 1,012, were gone. The survivors numbered just a few hundred, many of them pulled from the water by the Storstad or by nearby craft that hurried to help as the news spread down the river like a shockwave. Among the dead were families, crew, and a large group from the Salvation Army, men and women on a journey of faith and fellowship, now memorialized in brass and memory. Communities in Canada and Britain woke up to telegrams and lists, the cold machinery of tragedy. Names were read. Newspapers printed the impossible. In parishes and town halls, people gathered to ask how and why and who. If statistics feel dry, think of it this way. Picture a mid-sized town. Now imagine that town reduced by 1,000 voices in a single quarter hour. That's the hole the Empress tore in the lives of those who loved them. It's a haunting question. How could a ship go down that quickly? Part of the answer is where the Storstad struck. Low on the starboard side, opening a wound that let in water below the Empress's protective armour of compartments. Imagine a house with flood doors, great idea unless the water smashes straight through the foundation. Another part is geometry. Once flooding starts on one side, the ship leans. When it leans, water moves even faster into the lower side, making the lean worse, a feedback loop like a tip bucket you can't untip. As the starboard list increased, escape, paths disappeared, and the chance to correct the tilt vanished. And time, always time. The Titanic's slower sinking allowed lifeboat loading, flares, nearby ships to react, though not in time to save most. The Empress's 14 minutes were like a trapdoor opening under a crowded stage. Disasters at sea don't end when the water goes still. They continue in courts and inquiries where men in suits try to turn chaos into a narrative, assign responsibility, change rules, and make sure it never happens again. 2 inquiries followed, one in Canada and one in Norway. Each looked at navigation in fog, the signals sounded, the turns ordered, and the visibility at the crucial moment. The Canadian inquiry placed much of the blame on the Storstad's handling and judgment in the fog, suggesting she misread the Empress's position and kept moving into danger. The Norwegian side, unsurprisingly, offered a different view, that the Empress altered course in a way that made collision unavoidable. Maritime law often reads like a hall of mirrors. Your safe course becomes my trap. My horn becomes your misinterpretation. Here's the human truth behind the legal arguments. Both crews were working in bad conditions, using the tools of their time, whistles, watches, and nerve. In fog, even good decisions can be 2 degrees off, and 2 degrees at sea is the difference between a near miss and a torn open hull. Some practical changes emerged from such tragedies. Better rules for navigation in low visibility, stricter guidance on speed in fog, and over time, technology, radar, radio procedures, and later sonar that gives ships better eyes and ears. But in 1914 they had none of that. They had lookouts, experience, and faith in their instruments, compass and chronometer, neither of which can see through fog. Today, the Empress of Ireland rests in the St. Lawrence River, a sunken museum that only divers can visit. Cold water preserves, but it also challenges. Currents tug, visibility drops, and depth demands respect. The site is a grave as well as a historical artifact, a place where the past still feels present. Artifacts have been recovered over the decades. Her ship's bell has tolled in memorial ceremonies. Personal items have resurfaced like messages from the deep. Each object tells a micro-story, a suitcase clasp, a teacup, a nameplate, a dent in a brass rail. There's a memorial at Pointe-au-Père near Rimouski, where people can stand and look out over the same stretch of river and imagine a black hole slicing through a grey night. It's a place to bring your quiet and let the wind do most of the talking. The loss of the Empress of Ireland on 29 May 1914 took 1,012 lives in roughly 14 minutes, one of the deadliest peacetime maritime disasters in the North Atlantic. 2 official inquiries in Canada and Norway issued conflicting conclusions about responsibility in fog, but agreed on the circumstances. Limited visibility, misunderstood signals, and geometry that closed too quickly to correct. Placed beside Titanic, 1912, and Lusitania, 1915, the Empress stands as a third distinct case study, neither ice nor war, but a navigational failure that unfolded at river's mouth speed.